By far the most important development for church and school in mid-19th century Cradley was the opening of its first ragged school at Hightown in 1863. It's understandable that education in Cradley had not been a high priority to most of the ordinary folk. Feeding and keeping a roof over the family were much more important. In the early 19th century there were only two schools in Cradley, the Unitarian Church's Free School in Netherend and the National School belonging to Cradley Chapel in what is now Church Road. These charity schools later became day schools, providing education for far more children. Sunday schools, set up by most of the churches, originally to teach the 3 R's, became much more concerned with teaching the Bible. Ragged School is a name commonly given to the many independently established 19th century charity schools located in working class districts. They provided entirely free education and other missionary services for those too poor to pay. Several different schools claim to have been the first truly free school for poor or ragged people. John Pounds, a Portsmouth shoemaker, provides one of the earliest examples of the movement. The crippled cobbler, as he is sometimes called, began teaching poor children without charging fees from 1818. The term ragged school appears to have been first introduced by the London City Mission. It used the term ragged in its 1840 annual report to describe the establishment of 5 schools for 570 children raggedly clothed. In 1843, Charles Dickens visited Field Lane Ragged School in London and was appalled by what he saw, and he was inspired to write the story A Christmas Carol. Reverend Thompson became the vicar of Cradley Chapel in 1857. Nicknamed Tommy Two Sticks, he visited the homes of Cradley people to carry out an initial survey of his parish. He found many families in Hightown where no one attended church, and a common reason given was that they had no suitable clothes. Even more surprising is that a large number of children didn't attend any school at all, let alone Sunday school. There was obviously a need to provide education in the poorer, rougher areas of Cradley, not only for children, but for men and women as well. Local businessmen and benefactors helped financially with this. Although many of the benefactors were Anglican, in other words Church of England, the religious principles of the ragged schools were non-denominational. Hightown was not a particularly pleasant place to walk around or to live in, as Isaac Meacham records in his historical sketch of Thomas Crowther's visit to the area.
It was the last Sunday in May, 1860, that Mr. Thomas Crowther of Cradley, with a heart burning with a desire to work for his heavenly Master in winning souls for the kingdom of heaven, was distributing tracts in Hightown, Cradley, a place renowned for almost every species of sin and vice, a place where, as it were, Satan held his carnival, and lying, cheating, swearing, gambling, fighting, pigeon-flying, and Sabbath-breaking were indulged into a fearful extent. Husbands forgot their duty to their wives, wives to their husbands, parents to children, and children to parents, whilst the salvation of their never-dying souls was utterly neglected, being scarcely ever thought of.
The text goes on to tell how Mr. Crowther offered religious leaflets to a group of about 16 men, women and children, none of them very clean or well dressed, and all unable to read. It was agreed to meet 1 week later in one of the men's houses at 10 a.m. This was the beginning of Hightown Ragged School. Noah Hingley, Jeston Humphrey and Thomas Bloomer made arrangements for a school to be built, which would belong to the Ragged School. The new school was eventually opened with a tea and a meeting on Friday the 29th of May, 1863. In the same year, new records were produced by the Reverend Tommy Two Sticks that showed a large number of both children and adults in the Hightown area of Cradley who had no previous affinity to any church were beginning to attend Hightown Ragged School. In 1880, the infants department of the Cradley British schools separated from the girls' school because of the lack of space, and moved to the Hightown Ragged School until the new British schools were built in Collie Lane. Noah Hingley and Jeston Humphrey went on with Thomas Perry to establish the Ragged School at Two Gates on land bought from Samuel Bennett. Tradition says that all the materials for this second school were given by local industrialists, and it was erected by voluntary labour. Money was raised by selling bricks at a penny each before they were laid. The inside of the building was modest and functional, with no expensive furnishings. It was just a place where the poorest people could worship without needing to be well dressed. One of the highlights of the year was to go by the hundreds to the fields in Lutley, a cup on the string round the neck, children on wagons, and everybody singing their hearts out. The concerts, outings and debates, etc. were very much appreciated, something that the other chapels and middle-class churches could not match. A few lines from a poem which appeared when the County Express reported on a visit by Noah Hingley's daughter Leah describe what the pupils at Two Gates School learnt and how much they paid each Monday morning to attend.
We love the Two Gates Ragged School. There we learn to read and pray. Our manners are improving as we go from day to day. We learn to sing and spell. We learn to write and drill. We learn to knit and stitch and sew. Poor children to this school should go. The charge is but 1 penny for attendance every day, and if you cannot get the pence, the gentleman will pay.
After 1870, under the Elementary Education Act, public funding began to be provided for free elementary education amongst the working people. Board schools were built, and the demand for ragged schools declined elsewhere. The chapel was always at the heart of the Two Gates community. There was a tradition for many years that no charge was made for weddings, funerals or baptisms at the chapel, relying solely and successfully on voluntary contributions. It had also received tremendous support from local people and the congregation itself. Although in England most ragged schools have disappeared, the two in Cradley have remained, now independent churches, following the Methodist tradition, and still Protestant and still non-denominational.